Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. Each week, I take a couple of minutes and I talk about our weekly newsletter, what's been happening in the aquatic, the swimming pool industry, what are the topics that I think are really important for other aquatic professionals to be aware of, what are some trends coming down the pipe, what is news you need to be aware of. So each week, we do send out a newsletter on Wednesday. Today, I'm going to be talking about the April 29th, 2026 newsletter entitled AI and Aquatics. The newsletter will be linked in the description box down below, but the reason I make these YouTube live videos is because a lot of you have shared that it's just that much easier to listen to me talk about the topics, and then you can go back and selectively read the specific articles that pertain to your role or function. So let's jump right into it. A couple of weeks ago, I launched a new anonymous advice column. I would really recommend anybody in aquatics, regardless of your role, please do feel welcome to submit a question through this anonymous advice column. It is no different from my consulting work or certified pool operator class. There are no, quote, stupid questions. I am not here judging why you don't know something or why you're asking for advice or feedback. And if you are thinking it, there are likely other people in the aquatic industry in the same position. And I know, especially for those of you who are in high managerial roles, rec director, pool manager, engineering director, facility director, it can be really, really sticky to ask a question for which maybe you think you should know the answer, but you don't. So that is the main reason that I shared this anonymous advice column. It's going to be available each and every week in our newsletter. And then periodically, I'm also going to link to it across social media so that we can get a broader audience in terms of people who want to ask questions. This week, I want to address a specific question that came in. I'm going to read it directly off of the screen. I have shortened this question for clarity. The person asks, I'm noticing more and more AI generated content within messaging, not your newsletters, but in full conference presentations, other newsletters, Facebook posts, and even products. This is discouraging as it feels disingenuous and like they don't have the time to put out a quality product. A leadership type aquatics newsletter now has all the telltale signs of AI, and I cannot stand it. I am not sure if it is a question as much as how do you take this content, especially from entities that have been incorporating them more and more? Do you find yourself unfollowing or treating entities that do this differently than those that maintain their autonomy with AI writing? So thanks for that question. I did have a bit of a roundabout way to get to the answer that I have and my personal opinion, and I'm going to share that here as well. So when I started my business, Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, back in 2017, that was the official start of the business. Most of you in aquatics, you've always had some sort of side hustle, whether it's guarding for birthday parties or teaching contract leadership courses or being retained as an employee at multiple aquatic facilities. People are doing lots of different things to pay their bills. And so anything I'm saying is not a value judgment. It's just where I have personally landed in almost 10 years as a corporation, as a business that funds my entire salary and the primary income in my household. When you start out as a new business owner, you get all of these inputs from the internet, from business books, from vloggers, from podcasts, from different newsletters, the local chamber of commerce or different professional trade groups. And at the beginning, if you're me anyway, you listen to it all and you try and do it all. And so initially, when I started the business, the feedback in 2017, 2018, 2019, like the pre-COVID era, was very much scale, 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 grow, 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 sell to more customers, do more things, offer more services. And I have come to learn over the last couple of years that you just cannot be everything to everyone. You cannot please everyone, especially if you want to do certain things, certain products, certain services, certain niches very well. And so I have really streamlined the services that we offer, the products that I do offer, provide. And that's not to say that other providers can't do more services with more people, with more expertise, with more resources. But that is where I have landed after some bad experiences and also starting to really audit who I trust, who I listen to. There is one video I saw on the internet very recently. I will link to it in the description box down below. But it is somebody who said, nobody leaves a successful business to coach other people to build their business. And to an extent, I think that's really true. Of course, there are business owners that still have their primary business that made them wealthy or successful, and then they may now dabble in coaching and consulting. But I thought it was super, super interesting that the person was really doubling down on the statement that if you have a successful business, you're not going to leave it or stop it to start a new one. Certainly people sell their businesses or they exit for whatever reason. But if you are a business owner, you also know you're tired all the time and busy. So to have two businesses is possible, but it's a whole other league, so to speak. So that I thought was really, really pertinent. Bringing that back to AI and aquatics. So, as we've seen with the aquatic industry over the last couple of years since the pandemic in 2020 and the effects into 2021, 2022, 2023, probably into 2024 as well, there's been a lot of streamlining, employees or organizations where people were downsized, organizations have had to get, quote, leaner, so fewer people doing more work. As we've seen with the rising cost of goods over the last couple of years, with international tariff issues, the strong US dollar, supply chain issues throughout the Strait of Hormuz, and other issues around the world, the Houthis in the Red Sea. There's been a whole bunch of different issues that have caused things to become more expensive, and budgets have remained pretty fixed, especially for those of you in municipalities who develop your budgets 3, 5, 7 years out. You didn't know in 2022 that in 2026, 2027, we would have, let's say, 18% year over year cost increases to the essential goods that we need, like our pool chemicals, like our pump seals, like different key components that we need in our pool system. So to bring it back to the AI question, because you might be thinking like, this is way off base. What is she talking about? The main thing that I have had to do as a business owner is really prioritize what's important for me. And so when I take on something new, I kick out something old. Maybe that's in my personal life, maybe that's in my work life, but if I have a new passion project like this newsletter, like recording the video each week, there's something else I've had to cut because I only have, I could say 40 hours in a week, but I don't work 40 hours. I definitely work closer to 60 or 80 hours in a week. I think that is the attraction of AI to many workers, aquatic or otherwise, recreation or otherwise. We have so much that we need to be doing, regardless of your role. And all of the targeted ads, I receive them as well, AI will write your emails. AI will check your PowerPoint presentations for mistakes. AI will audit your payroll or your staff schedule, or AI will send out the latest e-blast about a product update at your amusement park. So the appeal of AI is I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I'm expected to do more with less, I'm not getting more money, I'm not getting more staff, I'm not getting more resources, I just need to make it work. And the average aquatic professional cannot push back and say, I refuse, because they would lose their job. I definitely get that. But to the question that was brought up regarding accuracy of content, I think it's really important to know that AI is not always accurate. And I share some specific statistics and citations from Morning Brew, which is a daily newsletter that linked back to the New York Times. I'll blow it up on the screen here in just a second because it appears very small. But I say the same thing in the certified pool operator course, whether it's for the test or whether it's for the classroom setting. I'm not making a moral or ethical statement that you cannot use AI or ChatGPT. What I'm saying is that the data that it's scraping from on Google remains the source of the problem. So if we're talking about commercial pool operations anywhere in the world, let's say Saskatchewan in Canada or Leeds in the UK, there's just not a lot of good data that's easily scraped accurately by SEO, search engine optimization, because the people in those fields, whether it's commercial service technicians, officers of public health, inspectors, what have you, they're not taking the time to put good data on the internet, right? When we're talking about priorities, one of the priorities I had to drop in favor of this newsletter was writing articles for Pool Pro magazine, which is a trade publication that I truly love the owner, Megan Kentrick, and her publications are very valuable to the industry, and I was well compensated and it was a fair workload, but I had to drop something because I couldn't do it all. And so I'm investing in building my own business and my own newsletter and my own YouTube presence. And then if something changes in the future, or if there's a specific topic that I want to write about, then I will, direct that her way. To bring it back to AI, the statistics from this New York Times piece that is cited in the Morning Brew newsletter is that accuracy is only about 90% on Google. And when they get into the weeds, that could mean tens of millions of inaccuracies per hour, or hundreds or thousands per minute. And that's in a large topic. Like, let's say I'm searching chocolate chip cookie recipes. Let's dial it down to swimming pool operations, lifeguard procedures, or something like that, that is even more niche, more narrow. There's going to be fewer results on the internet. Statistically, it may only be 90% accurate, but then the content, we don't even know the content that it's being trained on, that it's skimming, that it's reading, that it's learning, could be super inaccurate. And I see this all the time with the comments that I get with our national lifeguard videos on YouTube. People from other countries are always saying, well, you did this wrong. It's a suspected spinal, or you need to start with this procedure. And I always respectfully comment back that this is the procedure for Alberta, Canada, the National Lifeguard Program by the Life Saving Society. Your situation may be different if you're a Starguard Elite lifeguard on a Disney cruise ship, or if you're an Ellis lifeguard at a water park in Dubai or Legoland in Malaysia. Each is going to have different requirements. So to pull it back to AI in aquatics, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that there is significant limitations to what we're working from in AI. And I know for me personally, I have turned off AI in my word processor, like Microsoft Word, in Google Workspace, my email processor, not because of a moral or an ethical quandary. I literally did not like the way it was editing my emails, editing my documents, editing my presentations. It was making it perhaps more clear or more generic or easier to read, but it lost the flavor, my tone, my personality, and even my inflection or my intention when it comes to emphasis. And so the example I give in the newsletter is literally, let's fast forward to a deposition, and it comes back to AI. Thankfully, there's not a ton of lifeguard-related depositions in Canada, but I know for my poolies in the United States, this is a huge consideration in competency checks, onboarding, documentation, and compliance. And so let's say I'm a pool manager of a pool, and I'm being interviewed in a deposition about somebody who died on my pool, in my pool. And at this point in time, it's being alleged that myself or my lifeguards did improper CPR and reduced the likelihood of survival. And the family is going after me or my organization in a civil lawsuit. If the lawyer asks me about my in-service planning, because this is a common one I've seen, like in-service ideas, swim lesson ideas, lesson plan ideas. If the lawyer says, well, how did you come up with this in-service line for the in-service where you practice CPR? And I say I used Chat GPT. I mean, how is that going to go down in the civil proceeding, in the lawsuit? I mean, I don't want to be precedent setting. I don't think that's going to be successful for me or the organization. I don't think that's going to be perceived as an appropriate or reasonable use of my expertise or the resources available to me as, let's say, a first aid instructor trainer, experienced aquatic professional. Similarly, I just renewed my errors and omissions professional insurance and I was reading through the terms and conditions. And I did not specifically read the AI components because I'm just not going to use AI in my consulting and my professional work in that way. I do want to be clear that we use AI, for example, for closed caption transcription of these videos I create. It creates a text that is then edited by a real human with pool experience. And then we load that into YouTube so that people who need access to closed captions on these videos can access them. That is something we do use for AI. It is very limited. And it is an improvement over what we were doing before, which was that we hired a professional video closed captioning service. A human would listen to my presentations or my videos. They would handwrite, type out the captions. The cost was about $200 for an hour, which I was willing to pay because we need to provide accessibility and closed captions on our video. But the person making the captions was not an aquatic professional. So there would often still need to be secondary and tertiary revisions, because if we're talking about like a reverse and ready position for a lifeguard, an effluent gauge in pool operations, diatomaceous earth, like their accuracy is going to be different from closed captioning, again, a cookie recipe or, making a cheesecake in your kitchen. So, to pull it back to the final components of the op ed that I start every newsletter, there is a lot of impetus in advertising in the workplace, not necessarily aquatic specifically, but generally on the internet, right? I live in the world in 2026. I'm getting all these ads offering me services to transcribe procedures, or as I mentioned before, edit my emails for clarity, edit my documents. Maybe AI can be helpful in certain ways, but I need to decide for me as a person, as well as me as a business owner, where is it appropriate in terms of the resources that I'm using, the money I'm spending, the time that it's taking up from one thing or another, and is AI appropriate? So I give the example, you want your oncologist, your cancer doctor to say, yeah, I've developed a, cancer treatment strategy by feeding your symptoms and your medical history into ChatGPT or even a trained AI medical database. Probably not. What about if we're talking about AI and swimming pools, water safety, drowning prevention? We've talked about this quite a bit on this channel because I'm involved with an ASTM committee for AI drowning technology, as well as an ISO commercial pool operator drowning detection technology. They are tools that can form layers of prevention, but they are not the be all and the end all. I shared 2 links to 2 articles where we're fully aware that professionals of all types, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a consultant, whether you're an accountant. Quick personal story here. One of my bookkeepers that I fired, they were using an AI bookkeeping tool without disclosing it to me. It would be a different conversation if it had been disclosed to me, but they were charging the same amount and the results coming back had more and more errors. And in auditing the QuickBooks with another bookkeeper, she pointed out that there was an AI tool installed, like an app that was doing a bunch of work with rules that were not, anyway, it's a whole thing. Everybody's using AI. I'm not a purist. I'm not saying you can't. What does that look like in terms of accuracy and success? And some of you who watch The Pit, the medical TV show, may have seen that discussed earlier this year in season 2. No spoilers here, but in relation to medical records and accuracy. Lastly, because I usually like to leave people with action items, I guess my specific action items for every workplace is to come up with AI policies. Where are we going to use AI selectively? What are we comfortable with? What is appropriate for our organization? Like a municipality is going to have specific procurement laws, data storage laws, rules, right? Do you want the private data of your pool or water park being fed into a system that can then sell that data to another country, another industry, to lawyers, what have you? And I'm not even an expert when it comes to AI and all the ways that this is used or could be used. But I think it's also being practical, right? Circling back to the question the person asked, how much do you want to trust a provider that is only using AI without a filter or without edits or revisions? I mean, I've seen the AI capabilities of Canva to make YouTube thumbnails. I've used it to generate components of YouTube or edit aspects of a photo in a YouTube thumbnail. But I've gotten away from just using any AI on its own because it's not usually accurate. It's not usually quality. You can tell it's not real. You can tell there's no human touch. And to the same extent that Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, recently said in an interview that people want good content regardless of how pretty it is, which I I agree with, but I don't think is actually reflected in the algorithm these days. I think people will take in on the case of my website and our YouTube, if there's an ugly thumbnail, like last week's thumbnail is ugly because I don't really know how to make it better. I don't have a full-time thumbnail creator. It's an ugly thumbnail, but people are still watching because like you are watching or listening, the content is good. Doesn't matter the visuals so much because we're not doing, beach vacations. We're talking about the aquatic industry and news that you should be aware of. At the bottom of the newsletter, after the op-ed section, I do feature some links to some other videos pertaining to AI and my work in drowning detection technology, ISO, ASTM. So those are there if you're interested. Also this week, I shared a feature, really lovely feature. I didn't know it was going to be as thorough as it was, but I was interviewed by a woman in the aquatic industry for the weekly, maybe monthly, Pool and Hot Tub Council of Canada Women in Swim feature. So she did a very nice, she took my comments and she made a very nice article about my history in aquatics. So if you have been curious about that, you can click on it. I will link to it in the description box below, and it's also going to be linked in the newsletter. It's a really, really nice feature. I'm so appreciative of her featuring me. And then, as always, the second part of the newsletter is all of the other aquatic industry news that I have been thinking about this week. I'm going to do a shorter rundown. This is more state legislature in Texas, and they're quite disturbing. But essentially, there's always stuff happening each week in the aquatic industry, as you know. And this week, a big momentous occasion was Governor DeSantis in the state of Florida signed into law legislating swimming lessons and water safety as part of, I believe it was in hospital, like newborn education, as well as swim lesson vouchers. So that was a huge development in terms of water safety in a state like Florida, which has a significant coastline, lots of backyard pools, and a relatively high rate of drowning injuries and fatalities per capita each year. There is an allegation of another suction entrapment fatality. These are very, very hard to find in the news just because journalists don't know how to talk about them. I'm not saying a journalist is shying away from talking about them. I'm saying they literally don't understand the mechanics of what's happened and why a child or a person has been killed by a swimming pool. So I've been beating this drum for a long time. Many of you know my videos on the terrible incident with Alaya Lynette Jaco, who died in Houston, Texas a number of years ago. This is just a topic that I think we have no excuses in our industry to do better, and it's 100% on the prevention. It's very, very difficult to arrest or stop an entrapment once it happens. We only have 4 or 5 minutes before brain damage occurs. I shared an article regarding a dispute in Cocoa Beach, Florida, where a nonprofit is removing their life-saving rings amid a dispute with the local government. I was schooled on this topic actually yesterday in an interview that I will be sharing on our YouTube video next week pertaining to the Ironman Texas drowning fatality. I had a panel discussion with a number of surf lifeguards and endurance athletes. And one of the individuals who's based in Florida provided me some important context to this conversation where it is his perspective as a surf lifeguard, like a professional surf lifeguard who works in rescues and rescue management there, that ring buoys or life saving rings. I'm thinking from a flat water perspective. He was thinking from a surf, open waterfront, ocean perspective that we do not want lay people to grab a ring buoy and then run out into the surf and try and save somebody that they have no business saving, because also the distance, and this is my swimming pool bias. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to throw that life ring into the pool as I might in a hotel or condo pool. But his perspective is they remove the life saving rings in areas where there are no lifeguards, because lay people also die, also get into trouble thinking that they can be a hero and go out themselves, when it would be more appropriate for them to call 911 and stay on the beach with the victim in sight. I shared a recent update pertaining to some of the opening events associated with the Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Aqua Arabia water park. There is a feature on their first women's only day, which I think is super interesting. And I hope to be able to attend one of those days whenever I make it out to Aqua Arabia. I shared a fabulous article pertaining to the ongoing conversation about snorkel safety in Hawaii, as well as some of the considerations where people don't realize snorkeling is quite as dangerous as it is. You'll see another article further down in this week's newsletter pertaining to a recent excursion drowning fatality associated with a Carnival cruise ship. And snorkeling in general is not an easy activity. It does require specific skill set, water knowledge, equipment knowledge. I've shared that in several newsletters. But unfortunately, as we've all seen, when summer hits, snorkel kids and grandparents buy them for their kids, and they don't realize some of the potential risk associated with that. One of the topics I'm still following, if you've been here for any length of time, is I really truly believe that the water, like the drowning fatalities at the summer Camp Mystic in Texas in July of 2025, is going to provide some important reckoning for the aquatics industry. And I share a bunch of articles, including the most recent deficiency letter from the state of Texas Department of Health and Human Services, DISHES. I share that in the newsletter. Now, I know a lot of people I've spoken to have said, well, what's the deal with summer camp? It's not a pool, it's a river drowning. It was a natural event, it was a once in a lifetime situation. And the more I follow in the public hearings, the investigations, the reporting, the actual documents, the testimony of the family members whose children died, family members of children who survived, the Eastland family who operates the camp. Whether or not I was a summer camper myself for 10 years, I am becoming more and more horrified, as many people are, about the lack of documentation and procedures, roles and responsibilities, preparation, compliance. And so I share a number of Instagram reels as a video format. I know not everyone is on Instagram, but that is just the easiest way to share some of these sound snippets, as well as articles, links rather, linking back to previous newsletters where I've discussed this. I did also share some traditional news outlets. I believe I have a PBS link, a New York Times link. There is just so much coming out in the investigation discovery process of this tragedy. And I don't understand how anybody in their right mind could want the summer camp to open in just a couple of weeks. It's scheduled to open at the end of May, assuming their permit is renewed, which I think is a big assumption. I personally don't think it will be renewed, to say nothing of the crime scene investigations, to say nothing of the public accountability. And as many people have also shared, myself included, the lack of accountability that we see from the individuals who were on site at that time. There's a lot of blame game being put back on the patriarch of the family, the grandfather, the dad, so to speak, who drowned fatally, is not here to speak to what he did or how things were operated. But even just before I came on to record this newsletter, there was a discussion with one expert about how there was allegedly 45 adults, like people over the age of 18, working at the summer camp on the night of the incident. And nobody took the initiative to use the PA system and make an announcement. Nobody took the initiative to go from cabin to cabin and start an evacuation. All of the young counselors, some of whom were, quote, adults, age 18, 19, young college freshmen, sophomores, young people, they took initiative. Some survived, their campers survived, and some drowned. So I know this might seem like a red herring to those of you in aquatics, for example, at a hotel, a condo. Why do I care? But I think there is so much here that is mimicked in our aquatic facilities in Canada that are deficient. We're not doing enough in terms of lifeguard roles and responsibilities, clear procedures, clear evacuation plans, clear training. I'm speaking broadly here. Not every facility is guilty of this, but relying too heavily on the NL certification as the minimum, that there needs to be more on the job training, competency assessments, periodic competency checks, documentation. Like, just from what I know from my career and what I've seen in consulting, it's bad. The last couple of articles I share pertain to a U.S. Army soldier who won one of the highest civilian awards, excuse me, one of the highest military commendations for a non-combat, right, non-workplace rescue. Also shared some articles pertaining to portions of the Model Aquatic Health Code being adopted in North Dakota to increase lifeguard ratios. There was a workplace drowning fatality this week at a raisin facility. We don't have a lot of details yet on that. I shared an article pertaining to park takeovers. If you've been lucky enough not to have a park takeover yet, this is something you need to be on your radar as something that is definitely coming out of the big amusement parks, the big water parks, the bigger facilities. This is coming down the pipe in some areas. And I do hope to be able to talk to this more when I finally dig into editing my vlog from the World Water Park Association show. Was it IAPA as well? I don't think so, but World Water Park Association, I went to a session on this, and I'm pretty sure I recorded a couple minutes after the session. I shared a couple of different articles pertaining to individuals who have been charged and received prison time for their children, or the people the children they were caregiving for their drowning fatalities, as well as a really interesting video I watched. The algorithm fed this to me about staffing levels at Disney World, which I thought was really interesting because it really illuminated for me some of the concerns that I shared when I was at Disney last year, and also following the business practices of Walt Disney World, as they can charge more from the fewer people who go. More prioritization like lightning lanes or VIP, or how do we squeeze more money out of fewer people? The last two parts of this week's newsletter, yesterday, which was Tuesday, April 28th, 2026, here in Canada, is called the National Day of Mourning, and it speaks to workplace injuries and fatalities, not water specifically, but any workplace injury and fatality. And over the last year and a half that we've been doing this newsletter, I've really tried to shine a spotlight on the number of industrial drowning fatalities that continue to occur. I was speaking mostly about Alberta specifically as the jurisdiction where I live and I track these things. But I think it's going to be the case wherever you live in the world, or the US, Canada. A lot of these statistics are publicly available because they are investigated. And probably you would be amazed to discover that quite a number of them are water related, whether it has to do with equipment falling over into water, large tanks or vats, maritime work, like out on the open ocean, ice related work. I mean, this is something that we need to be talking about in water safety and drowning prevention, and we are just not at all. Last bit for this week, it was a full newsletter, let me tell you, but I finally released the re-recording of this session I delivered at the Southwest Pool and Spa Show in February in San Antonio, Texas. The title of that session is called The Commercial Use of Residential Pools. And it's an hour-long formal presentation that you can listen to and refer back to. If you are a pool service technician, if you're a health inspector, if you're a legislator, I tried to consolidate all of the physical concerns, chemical concerns, operational concerns, health and safety concerns, business and insurance concerns that I personally have with these types of facilities. I'm not suggesting you cannot rent out your facility, your home. And in fact, recently here in Calgary, I saw a home pool in the Southeast was just shut down for operating an illegal swim school, like doing commercial operations out of a residential grade pool. And I'm not here to create red tape, but I am here to prevent people from dying. And that might feel extreme, but I do think there needs to be some sort of regulatory process, some sort of permit component, insurance check, business practices, because you will have great operators who do exactly what they're supposed to do. They learn more, they train more, but there's other people who are in it to make a quick buck. And I would hate to hear of a suction entrapment, a chemical burn, a fatality associated with something that would have been easily prevented or caught through some sort of inspection or regulatory process. If you have the opportunity to watch this video, let me know your comments in the description box below. I will link to it as well. That is it for this week. I know each week these videos get longer and longer, but I appreciate the likes, the shares, the comments. It shows me that there is an interest in, hearing my thoughts and opinions, me chat with you about these topics, because I do try and keep the newsletter on the shorter side. Let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong. And I will catch you next week. It's already going to be May, the long weekend. Pool season's just a couple weeks away. But I will be back next week with a newsletter, with a YouTube live. Thank you so much for subscribing, watching, and I will see you then. Bye for now.